Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for showing up. Appreciate it. It's an exciting topic. Nate's going to do the introduction of Zena because he's in that space. I was fortunate enough to meet Zena in New Orleans at a conference. It was a cannabis conference, but it was a conference. It was really professional, and we just hit it off and we started talking about some of the things that we're doing, some of the amazing things she's done in the past and she's doing now. So I said, she wanted to come and meet all of us. We've been trying to collaborate on some things, so she's here as other than just give us some education on what's going on in the space. But I'll let Nate give you a little background about Zena.
Sure. Hey, how's it going? I just got to meet Zena this morning. Had a quick call with her yesterday, so I have not spent near enough time to fully understand her capabilities. But she spent. She came from a finance background. She went to Hofstra, has an MBA from NYU. Was in the tech industry for a while in a lot of different roles, mostly finance related before joining KPMG, doing various activities in as a partner, a revenue generating partner, and then working with their performance management team in the CTO role. She was there for 6 years before moving over to Booz Allen, which is a large consulting firm heavily in the analytics, cybersecurity space. She's been there for 3 years, leading their analytics team in a lot of different capacities. And now she runs Genrex, founded her own consulting company. So we're very happy to have her here. She's going to unpack some of artificial intelligence, BI, data science, what these things mean, what they don't mean. So I think it's going to be very informative. She indicated she's normally giving this to a room of C-suite individuals who don't ask questions very often. So ask questions. I can tell already that she's happy to share all her knowledge. So Zena?
Thank you. So I'm going to kind of move around a little bit. First of all, I am so excited to be sharing some of this content with you. This is a presentation I actually put together just for you guys, because much of what I do in my C-suite conversations is shut the door and let them ask anything they want to ask, right? Because in a mixed meeting, they're often afraid to raise their hand and ask a question for fear of seeming uninformed. Right? They don't want the room to look at them and go, oh my God, if you don't know this, where are we? So the goal for today's presentation is to give you some context from a finance and accounting perspective, right? How did we get here? What is this AI thing all about? And how should we be thinking about this? And more importantly, how should we be thinking about this for our customers? Right? So both internally facing and externally facing. And we are in hold mode while I try and get this to go forward. It is on.
Just because there's a button.
Because there's always a technical glitch. So if this is the worst one we've got, we're in good shape.
Okay, it should go now. Just give it a... No? All right, let's try to restart.
Otherwise, I'll just do it from the laptop. That's fine too.
All right, just give it one click for me. Can you just point it up at over there? It's very interesting. It always works when you test it, you know?
Just turn it around. I'll just hit the down button. No
It
problem.
was off. There you go. That's why. Here we are.
Oh, power
Okay.
button. I activated it.
That was next week.
All right. So I'm not going to read through this because this is a lot of content. So I'm going to pretty much blast through this. I do want to encourage you to ask questions, but I will sort of pick and choose what I answer so that we get through the entire presentation since we're recording. Everybody had a chance to read through it? Okay, so current state of AI. You know, this is going to be something that most of you are going to be familiar with. This is not new, right? We are seeing this in our personal lives. The data exhaust that we're leaving on our phones, the opt-in, the impact of GDPR, all of a sudden we're all getting privacy notices, right? Why? Because there's an entire data economy that's happening that nobody knows about. So the person with the biggest database essentially wins. Companies like Axiom, LexisNexis, Experian, right? This is what they're trying to accumulate because ultimately, as AI takes hold in the market, they want to sell that content on a subscription basis, right? They're responsible for enriching it, and they sell it out, but I mean, just in general, it's being applied everywhere. And the people who did it first are the Googles, the Googles, Facebooks, Uber, right? They built their entire business model around a new set of capabilities. So conceptually, you know, you can see this as the progression from I have a spreadsheet that's the most data I can sort of analyze at once to BI, okay, maybe I can see more stuff, and then data marts and OLAP, et cetera, will go through sort of that timeline. But what's happened is we've arrived at a point where you can look at an entire organization in terms of its interdependencies at once for the first time. So ultimately, we're turning the work that we do, the analytic work that we do, into a huge optimization problem, right? Like a shield optimization. What have you. All right, so this one. Am I missing one? Yeah. So the World Economic Forum predicts that in the next 10 years, $100 trillion of value is going to be unlocked through the use of artificial intelligence. Okay. So the opportunity is there, and you know, everybody's looking into the future, right? Nobody's got a perfect crystal ball, but I would suggest that that's probably a pretty solid estimate, give or take 10 or 20 million or trillion in either direction. But the anxiety question, right, because you have to have an anxiety question, is very similar to what we saw in terms of the industry market basket. The companies that were 50 years old, that 20, 30 years ago were the predominant anchors of indexes, some of them don't even exist anymore. Now time is speeding up. The pace of change is creating an environment where he says in the next 10 years, I predict it's going to be in the next 5. This is moving that fast. All right, so what is it and how did we get here? Well, I'm going to talk about how we got here first. I think that makes more sense. So I'll tell a personal anecdote for this one. I started my finance career 31 years ago at Citicorp. Right, I was financial analyst for the GSO data center in Plainview, New York. Okay? That was the B2B data center. It was, as you might imagine, full of IBM heavy iron and lots of programmers. And what was the output of all of that? Green bar, right? Does anyone in this room remember what green bar reports are? Okay. So those are essentially just computer printouts. Stacks and stacks of, connected pages, and you had to page through everything, and we're still doing accounting by hand. And then spreadsheets came along. So in 1988, 30 years ago, I got my first laptop. Okay? Didn't have a hard drive. Wasn't connected to a network. I was flipping those big floppies to get my spreadsheet to turn on. And I thought that was incredible. That was incredible. 16,000 lines? How am I ever going to fill that up? Right? So that was in the beginning of this age of traditional BI. So now vendor tools improve. We have better reporting. We have this concept of, we hadn't gotten to data warehousing yet, but we had this concept of, let's point our BI tools at the various reporting repositories we've got, whether it's our general ledger, whether it's the mainframe, right? And it was the first time that we could distribute reports and, that all went into the black book or the blue book, right? Whatever the client's monthly package, quarterly package was called. What was unique about this was it was still completely owned and operated by IT. So when I, as an analyst, would go to IT and say, hey, give me this information, they'd be like, here you go, and we would go through this back and forth of, yeah, this doesn't look right to me, you check this, oh, little problem with the report, how about this one, and it took cycle time, chewed up my time, their time, to try to get it right. And I finally said, you know what, guys, just give me the raw data, I'll figure it out. They wouldn't give you access to it. Why? Because business users might hurt themselves. They don't really know what they want. Right? You've lived it. I can see that. But what happened was this shift between 95 and 96, or sort of in that time frame, of vendors beginning to build purpose-built applications so that business analysts could do their own analysis. Okay, that's sort of when, okay, who knows Hyperion? So, statutory consolidation application, it was the first time you could automate intercompany eliminations, journal entries, right? I was at Young and Rubicam as the head of consolidation during those years. And for me, it was life-changing. I wound up in technology because of that experience. I went from PwC walking in January with 12 people and a chest full of legal pads and pencils to watching entire corridors of work papers disappear. And at the end of that, PwC would come in and all I had to do was give them a read-only access to the consolidation application. They were no longer sitting in my office all day long. We were able to reduce the amount of Q&A. And at the end of the day, it just became a negotiation on what needed to be remediated and what didn't. So it really reduced the audit time, which for me was a great thing. Now, if I'm PwC, I'm like, okay, now what? We have to figure out how to expand. We'll talk about some of that in a little later. But the tipping point for business users was the advent of something called OLAP. Now, everybody knows what a Rubik's Cube is? Imagine a Rubik's Cube as a database, and you can just slice and dice it, look at it any way you want. Right? It was the first time that business users could have a real meaningful dialogue with the data. Really go explore. Answer any question they needed to. So that was just a sea change from I can only consume what's in my spreadsheet to I can go walk around and look at all the data and identify opportunities, identify risks, and streamline much of the manual effort that you would have had with spreadsheets. I'll give you a practical example. In 1997, it was the first year I was a consultant in technology. I was using a product called Essbase, which Hyperion ultimately bought before Oracle bought Hyperion. And I went to QVC and I built them a profitability model that was fully loaded profitability for 130,000 SKUs. That was never possible before. You might have been able to build it in a mainframe, but the cost of doing it would have been exorbitant. All right, I think we built it for maybe $250,000, which for QVC at the time was really not that much concern. So now we move into today's day. Right? What's happening with technology is that it has essentially gotten out of the way. Another personal anecdote, as a financial analyst, I was thinking at 50 miles per hour, just say, right? Imagine the speed on it. And IT could only give me 30 miles per hour worth of stuff that I needed to do my job. So I had to figure out, how do I close that 20 mile per hour gap? So I learned a database called FoxPro, went back to IT, said, just give me the raw data, and I won't touch your repositories or your applications, right? You don't have to worry about a business user writing a query that's going to start this thing spinning for 2 or 3 days because they didn't know how to write SQL properly, right? So IT liked it because they were like, here. And then I was self-sufficient. Imagine that technology is no longer the barrier. So going back to the speedometer analogy, TAC can do 2,000 miles per hour now. And that's just kind of what we can envision and know about. And humans, we're still thinking at maybe 100 miles per hour. How are we going to close that 1,900 mile per hour gap? It's not about the technology anymore. It's going to be about changing the culture, educating the workforce, reskilling the workforce in some cases, changing the roles. I'm actually writing a book on that. Right? The changing organizational structure. What does the new constitution of the C-suite look like, and why? Right? Because it's human behavior that's going to have to change for us to take full advantage of what technology can do today. It's going to change our operating models across the board. So, first of all, I highly recommend everybody read that article from last year, July, Brynjolfsson and McAfee. One of the best depictions of what's happening today that I've read, and still is. I mean, I follow Brynjolfsson quite closely because he's sort of a visionary in terms of where all of this is going. But what's important about this chart is we're in 2018. You see the adoption rate, we're very quickly moving into this adoption. The rate of adoption is going to be incredibly fast. Now, think about why is that? Well, there's a reason you've got all these startups that are changing the world, right? Like Priceline did 15 years ago. They were one of the early adopters of algorithms. They are still killing the market in terms of what they can do, and the competition has had 15 years to catch up. Another good depiction of this, this is a book, Tom Davenport, another very, very visionary intellectual, I'd say. So this is what we were talking about in terms of BI, right? Standard reporting, we went to ad hocs, query, drill down, things like alerting, right? CFO comes into the office in the morning, turns on the PC, oh my God, Mexico, something is blowing up, big red alerts, right? We called it, at the time we called it the Fisher-Price approach to executive dashboards. Right, make it easy, don't let them hurt themselves, big primary colors. Anyway, so then we moved into that middle space, right, statistical analysis. So when I started using OLAP, this multi-dimensional tool, which enabled me to build something for Nabisco, for example, another profitability app, think about this. Rubik's Cube is a 6-dimensional space. So what Nabisco was trying to do was figure out the profitability of a roll of Lifesavers, Christmas packaging, in Ohio, sold through distributors, out of convenience stores, sold by this sales rep on this day with this chart of accounts. Right? There's 8 dimensions right there. Now, the human brain can kind of encapsulate somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 dimensions at once in terms of interdependencies and real comprehension. Okay? Dell, for example, built a database, a cube, that was 120 dimensions. So you can't look at it in its entirety and understand it, but what you were able to do for the first time is sort of navigate around and answer any question you needed to, because you could navigate it. So the other thing that happened that enabled really sophisticated forecasting was this concept of write back. So the issue with the early days was I couldn't touch it, and I for sure wasn't allowed to write to it. Right? But enabling write back allowed me as a business user to say, like we did for Pepsi, right? So beverage consumption model in order to forecast. We were incorporating weather data into that in 1999. Now it's like a big deal. Oh, we're going to incorporate external sources of data. We were already doing it, right? But it was hard to do. That one cost significantly more than the QVC engagement and was significantly more complicated because we also brought in econometric data. So this aspiration of being able to create a space where I can understand the interdependencies of everything that's happening. How is sales and marketing working together? What does that do to our financials? What does that do to our supply chain? Right? It becomes an optimization exercise where you can pull all the levers to figure out what you should be doing. And now, where we are is this prescriptive layer. So everything becomes an optimization problem. Maybe it's field optimization, maybe it's product mix. Stochastic optimization, all that refers to is the next leap that we're going to take. And we're already taking it, and we'll go into that in a moment, but stochastic optimization means I'm going to fill this thing with data, and I'm going to allow the machine to tell me what I should be looking at. Okay, so where optimization, I kind of understand the interdependencies, the relationships, what levers I should pull. In stochastic optimization, it's going to tell me and alert me to other things that I should be looking at, correlations that I had no idea existed. All right, so everybody's heard about AI. You also hear about machine learning and neural nets. Is anyone like totally clear on what the relationship is between those three things? Probably not. It even takes me a little while. Okay, so AI is becoming this wrapper term. Not like Jay-Z, but with a W. And that is a good thing and a bad thing, right? On the good side, at least we're getting this taxonomy of definitions, and it's firming up as we're getting more and more experienced in understanding how to use these tools. And so this is a process that's probably going to go on for another year or so until the industries, all industries, right, land on a common set of definitions. But for now, so we've got AI, which means pretty much everything that is applied mathematics enabled by extreme compute capability and lots of storage and lots of data. It's the easiest catch-all definition for it. Machine learning, on the other hand, is a process by which we say, here's data that I know about, this is what I want you to use, and now tell me about this other set of data. What should I be looking at? What things can you tell me about it that I didn't know previously? And then deep learning goes even a step further. Deep learning gets convoluted because that's the black box that everyone's looking for, right? You put data in, it does lots of stuff, something comes out, but there's no traceability at this point. Actually, I think that would be a great application to build, which is sort of the auditor capability for deep learning. At some point, someone will figure it out because it's important, right? We need to understand, like, why did it give me this answer? You know, we're not quite there yet. I included this diagram to the right, the traditional modeling and the machine learning diagram, because I think it's a really elegant way to explain the difference between how we do things today and what we're going to be doing. So in traditional modeling, you want a prediction, you've got some data, and you build the model by hand. And the analogy is really spreadsheets, right? I have to code every formula. I can copy paste, so there are some things that make it a little easier, but fundamentally, every calculation needs to have been calculated somehow. And someone needs to write the math to do it. Okay? And that's how we build models today, whether they're in mainframes and spreadsheets or in other applications. In machine learning, what happens, it's a two-step process. I take sample data where I know what the expected result is. I push it through, and the computer builds the model. Then it circles around, and I add the data I want to do analysis against, and use the model, and push it through, and then the result comes out. That's fundamentally machine learning. With neural networks, this happens hundreds, maybe millions of times. That's why you lose the traceability. Okay? That's why it becomes a black box. So, where is it being applied today? I love this picture because it sort of tells the history. of where it started. So really, applied data science started in marketing with consumer targeting. So in tech, media, and telecom, it's low on the list because they're kind of already there, right? Think of like Netflix, for example. Netflix, maybe not a good example because they were actually built in the new age. Let me come back to that one. But now they're trying to figure out, we're already relatively sophisticated in how we're analyzing our data. So what needs to catch up? Information technology, modernization. We're also at a very interesting tipping point in time because a couple of years ago, people were still trying to extract value out of their global SAP or Oracle implementations. And they were like, yeah, we're not adding any technology. Now we're coming up to a modernization cycle, which is where IT and business professionals need to look out at what should we buy. The decision process is much more important this time because you don't want to rip and replace it with something that just does what the old stuff did. Which is really, think about it. For all the ERP implementations, have you guys done some of those? Right? What were you doing? You were replacing one GL with another. Were you getting additional value? Maybe. I'd suggest that you need to ask the business users. IT is going to say, it's awesome, users are happy. Right? When you talk to, the Office of Finance, maybe not so much. So in consumer, again, marketing is at the end because they're already pretty good at it, and now they're trying to figure out supply chain optimization. That's the focus of AI. Financial services, it's about selling to the individual. How do we have a relationship with every single customer we've got? Professional services, where are they focusing? Strategy. Why? Because they don't know what to implement yet, right? So that's the next revenue stream, helping clients figure out what to do. Very similar to the journey you guys are about to embark on, right? How do we start bringing in tools that enable us to get comfortable with data science, applied data science? So I won't go through all of them, but this is going to be distributed to everybody, and I highly recommend you sort of just eyeball that, depending on what industry you're serving. If you think about the cannabis industry, for example, they're early days, right? They don't know what they don't know. Many of them are too small to, this seems like even the foundation that needs to be built for strategic use of the information they have, they're not there. They're still in spreadsheets and black and white notebooks somewhere, right? And what's in people's heads. But they're getting there very quickly. This is, again, the pace that these things are going. The cannabis industry is going to be much more mature in terms of their use of information. 1 year from now, 18 months from now, you can be certain of it, because what they realized between 2017 and 2018 was that their understanding of their data, their use of their data, directly impacted their valuation. So if they had an exit strategy, they were looking to build something and sell it, that was not an immaterial uplift, right? To be able to say, here's what we're doing with our data, here's how we potentially may monetize it. And by the way, monetizing doesn't mean you're going to package it up and sell it. That's just one. They also say monetizing to mean better internal use. How do I turn it into incremental revenue or reduced expenses strategically? So here's one example, consumer or retail. So I was in Miami for the Food Marketing Institute. Did a similar presentation. It was heavily consumer focused. But when we go to clients, here are the things they're trying to figure out. So a couple of years ago, I was at Hallmark. Everybody knows Hallmark, right? They have 13 different businesses, 3 of which are digital. Each of them has its own consumer database. Nobody shares information. And they were like, how are we ever going to get into this omni-channel where we understand the customer and we can message them and incent them across all 13 businesses so that they know us as well as we know them? These 3 are where, well, actually, these 2 are where not enough has been done. So my example here is Stanley Black & Decker. I think I mentioned that in terms of product mix and delivery fulfillment. They went from 45% accuracy in their forecast to 75%, which was a huge impact for them. Straight to top line. And here's what clients are asking for, right? Help me find the potential value, right? I don't want to implement IT for IT's sake. Help me find the one thing that I should figure out first. What's the first question I should ask? Second thing is they want case studies, right? Every client wants case studies. Show me where you've done this for someone who looks exactly like me, in my industry, our size, this many people. Right, well, we're not there yet. It's, most use case databases have maybe 100 use cases. So you can kind of find things that look similar, but we're not at the point yet where we've got like every use case figured out. And then what we're doing today. What's happening today? What's gonna happen? What decisions do I need to make? So the commercial market, how are they buying data science today? And I would suggest that the sweet spot right now is companies that are somewhere between $1 billion and $5 billion. Those are the ones where there is an opportunity to implement this quickly, to address specific business issues, to provide immediate uplift. That group I believe, is going to wind up being like the next market industry basket, participant, because they are like that deeply entrenched. So, does everybody know who Gartner is? Okay, so Gartner is an organization. They're part of the big 3. It's Gartner, Forrester, and IDC. These are the guys who say this technology is good. This technology has a ways to go. They do all of the. In fact, you should be looking at a lot of that stuff as part of your analysis. They're the ones who put the housekeeping seal of approval on technology and business applications. And this is their, this diagram is what Gartner calls their hype cycle. Okay? So as you can imagine, when we talk about AI, expectations really high. I believe we're somewhere in this space. We're either at the peak of excitement, right? Everybody's like, this is going to change everything, it's going to be awesome, to, holy shit, this is hard work. And I'm not sure we can even get it done. Right? I can't tell you how many large firms I've been in where go in, have a conversation with them, let's figure out what the first question is that you should answer that would be hugely material for you. And they're like, we joined a consortium, we're in there with Dell and Apple and HP, and we're gonna figure this out like sort of together. And I just hired 2 data scientists, and we're good. Okay? May I call on you in every 3 months just to see how things are going? I call the next time. They're like, yeah, no, things are awesome. We're starting to figure this out, right? 6 months in, yeah, we're still sort of trying to figure out how to apply it now. And 1 year in, they call me back and they're like, okay, we've been spinning our wheels and we've been spending money and we have nothing. Okay? Or in the case of Thomson Reuters. When I was at KPMG, I got a call from Thomson Reuters from their CIO and said, we built a data lake. No one came. No one's using it. Why? Okay? Short answer is because you need to take the business on the journey with you. You can't just build it and think they will come. Right? Goes back to that human evolution we all have to go through in order to actually take advantage of this stuff. All right. This is why people are like, I have no idea what to do. This is the market landscape. We got infrastructure, we've got analytics, we've got applications that are beginning to be built, purpose-built applications, either for industries or for functions. We've got open source. Right? Has everyone heard of Hadoop? I'd like to see more heads on that one. And then we've got the data economy that I was talking about. All of these companies are just trying to assemble the biggest database of everything that they can sell to people so that those people can enrich their data science projects. So it's a huge revenue stream. This is no different than what we had a similar chart back in the mid-90s for analytics, right? You had every BI vendor going, well, we do analytics, right? You had the GL, ERP vendors, we do analytics. Everybody did analytics. The same way you will now see every company on the planet is going to go, oh yeah, and we're using AI to do this. And maybe you are, maybe you're not, you know. But. All right, so what are the options? Build versus buy. Same conversation, right? So when forecasting started to take hold, Hyperion had a product called Hyperion Plan. It was built on that OLAP technology that I was talking about earlier. And so in every single conversation, we had to address IT saying, well, we just want the tools. We'll build it ourselves. Okay? And business saying, could we just have something that's like already sort of configured with the functions that I know I need? And, you know, it's that tension between business and IT. Who owns it? Right? Who operates it? I think we've shifted now to an acknowledgement on a broader level that the business should be in the driver's seat. Right? Again, technology is just enabling technology. It's not the solution. So you can do a couple of things. You can walk in with a box of Legos and you can build anything you want, right? Or you can build something that just requires configuration. I'll use the HFM, Hyperion Financial Management. So the first time I bought a statutory consolidation application, why was that like a leap in the right direction? Because I bought something that was essentially a CPA in a box. I didn't have to teach it accounting. All I had to do was tell it about my company. Here's how we're structured. It was the first time we could look at it. Here's our legal books. Here's our management books. Here's our US GAAP and statutory books. That was huge because before that, those three things were in three different places. And they never tied. Trust me, never tied. So having it all in one place, so that I could actually make my books tie, that was a big deal. So the pros and cons, or let's just talk about what these are. So in Build, you've got open source. Open source is great. Why? It's free. But you need some serious technical depth in order to effectively apply it. Certainly at scale in an organization. The cloud providers are all getting into this space. So AWS now has an entire big data stack that you can just get access to if you're a client of theirs. Microsoft's Azure offering also contains an entire set of big data tools for you to use. So that takes and Google is now getting into it as well. That sort of takes I don't want to have to build a bunch of infrastructure out of the equation. Then you've got a set of tools providers. So I am going to create some features and functions that will be useful to you in building out data science, but it's still just tools. So you have to know how to use them and which ones to use and why. And then you've got folks like Hortonworks and Cloudera. Interesting concept because they're selling open source, which is free. How are they making money? They're wrapping services around it. So services and, again, sort of wrappers like the AI concept. And what you're paying them for is their help in managing your data science project, managing your data, trying to make it easy for you, right? But still, fundamentally, pretty sophisticated like tools that are cobbled together. On the buy side, and this is where we've pretty quickly headed, and Nathan asked me a question earlier, like, what do I like in terms of easy to use, instant data science and stuff. When I was at KPMG, we rolled out Alteryx to all of our analysts because it was sort of their first foray for the business analyst into applied data science. Because what this particular package and others now in the market can do is they can ingest not just numbers, but textual, unstructured data. Right? So I can do, maybe I'm doing, an analysis in a legal firm. Legal firms have tons and tons of documents that at this juncture they're probably imaged and are sitting somewhere. Well, that stuff can be searched now. Right? PDFs can be searched. So your ability to do analysis as a business analyst is greatly facilitated by some of these tools that are analyst focused. And then you've got functionally specific applications that people have come up with. So we've got Textic for HR, Seal for lending, and Affirm, I think, is insurance. And then additional industry-specific tools, so not tools, applications. Distillery is an interesting one. It's just a group of data scientists. And what they're doing is they're doing a sub-second advertising marketplace. So when you do a search on something, and there's an ad on the side, a banner ad, that gets delivered to you, what happened in that small period of time is that you clicked, Distillery was alerted, they then set up an auction to the highest bidder to deliver a relevant ad to you. That's happening sub-second, and they're doing billions of it every day. It's all automated. 23andMe, everybody's familiar with that, right? You see the ads. Yeah, they're telling you, hey, I'm going to tell you about your health issues, things you might want to look out for. through your DNA. Maybe I'll give you some ancestry type, information. But what are they really doing? They're taking that and selling it to life sciences. Your DNA information. Right? That's how they make the money. All right, so what I'm most excited about is where we are right now. And this is artificial intelligence software as a service. From a layperson perspective, what that means is I can ask a question in English, it will go do the data science for me, and bring me back an answer in English. All right? These are early days. I sit on the board of a couple of startups around this. I do have my favorites, right? Because what we're doing is now getting super honed in on yield maximization, right? Mathematical optimization of either revenue, product mix, human capital management. So this is kind of the landscape of build versus buy. But pros and cons. So in a build situation, the pros are I can apply it to anything. I just have to build it every single time. I need a fairly deep set of people who understand how to do it. These people are hard to find and they're expensive. By the way, another prediction, there will be a course correction on the data scientist salaries coming in probably in 2 years time, easily. So talent's hard to find. ROI, going back to my other question, well, we spent a year doing it and we've got nothing. Right? That's a reoccurring. This is also why we're sort of heading into the trough of disillusionment. And when did you decide you were going to be a software shop? Right? Is that the business, core business that you're in? For most, the answer is no, so they shouldn't be doing that. On the buy side, and this is, don't try and figure it out yourself. Get some help and accelerate your journey. Right? Time is of the essence now. The people who figure this out the fastest are going to be the last ones standing when the dust settles. When it's applied correctly and you identify the right first question to ask, you can often recoup many times your investment in the first year. And again, it's designed, we want power analysts to be the owners and operators of this. IT as a support function. The cons, you have to be careful what you pick, right? Because you also don't want to wind up with, well, I've got this data science solution for this function, this data science for that. We don't want to go back to the days of BI where I would routinely walk into a client and they'd be like, okay, we've got 18 BI tools. It's this proliferation happens very, very quickly. So, as you're thinking this through, flexibility, but also broad applicability is going to have to be one of the dimensions that you do some of your decision making on. Okay, so this is kind of how the professional services landscape is sort of landing. So everybody knows about IBM Watson. Okay. Super deep pockets. What did they do? They just built the infrastructure, they built the teams, and they were like, all right, we'll figure it out. And you know how they figured out how to capture market share? I lost a $10 million deal to them 2 years ago at a life sciences company. Why? Because they gave it to them for free. Right? Part of the investment strategy is to buy market share. And also to capture the data. So as a life sciences company, giving them my data, they're aggregating it with everybody else's and using it to build better analytics. Not a bad strategy, actually, if you can afford it. The big four, I can only, well, actually, we all did the same thing. So we made a couple of acquisitions early on. The first one we absolutely broke out of the gate. They walked in, they said, these people don't know anything from data science, and they sort of scattered to the winds. Right? Second time we were a little smarter about it. We had evolved in our thinking, and it formed the basis of what we built at KPMG. It was called the Lighthouse. It was our open source stack. It was basically the labs that we built to serve clients to figure out how to build new services that we could then sell as a service and automate as much as possible. And this was 2011 timeframe. We were building things like anticipating warranty repairs through the use of digital listening. So going out, scraping as much internet as we could, identifying conversations about Ford products, and where people were having a conversation like, I don't know, there's a rattle in the front driver's, side, and I don't know what it is, and should I be worried about it? And then correlating that with warranty repairs information, and taking it one step at a time. So first, on the warranty repairs, how do we anticipate, based on the data that we have, that something is likely to break? And then further, how do we predict it well enough so that we can prevent it before it becomes a recall? Right? And then by extension, by adding the digital listening content, maybe we can hear customers talking about something that we didn't even know, and now we go back, so it becomes this iterative cycle of learning, right? Now we go back to the warranty database and figure out what we should do to sort of preempt that. Maybe even reaching out to those customers because they're identifiable. Then we've got small shops of data scientists who are like, yeah, we're going to build a company and we're going to go and teach people how to do data science. And the problem is that they're usually walking around with the Lego box, right? So the likelihood that you or your clients are going to be able to maintain it afterward is pretty small. So you're always going to be tied to them. Now, as a consulting company, maybe that's a good thing, right? But from a client perspective, I would rather have you solve my problem and be self-sufficient, and then the next time I have a problem, you're the only person I'm giving it to. This is where we're going. Purpose-built applications. We need to configure them. It's very similar to, I want to buy a CPA in a box. I just want to tell it about my client or tell it about my company. But we are super early days on this, right? But it's going to happen fast. Here are some examples of data science applied in compliance. So anti-money laundering. So financial services, interestingly enough, financial services and pornography. Those are the two early adopters of technology. Because they've got the money to invest. GDPR compliance testing. This is going to be an interesting one, right? Imagine if you could go into a client and you could set a crawler loose in their systems to identify anywhere there is PII that shouldn't be there, whether it's in emails, on people's laptops, right? This becomes an enterprise risk question. What's your exposure? And how do you define exposure? So if you're able to do that, you know that you've dropped your risk substantially. as it relates to GDPR. And I get the United States is not quite, I've spoken to clients who, give it sort of short shrift. It's not going to be that we don't do business in Europe. If there's one laptop in Europe where somebody says, yeah, I want that, and I'll give you my information so that I can download your white paper or what have you, you're beholden to GDPR. From audit perspective, expense reporting, financial audits are going to be automated. What does this really mean? Now, this is important for you guys, right? Because audits are your lifeblood. What if you could automate behind the scenes first and simplify your own process? In other words, reduce the manpower necessary to produce an audit, right? And also increase its accuracy, effectiveness, etc. But getting up to speed on that internally is going to arm you to start thinking about what other services can we provide our clients if our audit revenues are getting smaller. Because in the short term, you're going to be able to take those savings to the bottom line yourselves, but then the market's going to get smart. And you're going to be competing with other audit firms who are like, oh, well, we use machine learning. And so our audit fees are half of what everybody else is on. So it's a really important topic strategically for professional services firms to figure out. Not unlike when SaaS came along, right? Everybody was putting, building ERP implementations, huge billings for putting in technology, and now all of a sudden, you've got the vendors going, SaaS, it's going to be super easy, right? So implementations are going to be like a third of the time, a third of the money. And I was a partner, an Oracle partner, in the room when they were saying this, and I was looking around the room going, am I the only person who's very alarmed by this in terms of revenue degeneration? Right. That's what we're going to see with automation using AI.
In healthcare, when we implemented electronic health records, there was a big projected ROI in reducing headcount, which never materialized because it created all different opportunities using the data, care coordination, so forth. I was talking to a friend of mine who works at Deloitte in their artificial intelligence efforts, and he's telling me that he anticipates a similar thing with auditing. He says, even though they use AI for the audits, that a certain number of those transactions need to be reviewed by a human when there are anomalies or certain types of situations. And he says suddenly now you're able to audit every transaction, not just the sample transactions.
Sure.
And it's creating a lot more work that they hadn't anticipated. So do you think that's like just that'll eventually become done by machine learning as well? Or do you think it's going to be a similar thing like we had in healthcare where it's really not going to reduce the headcount, there's going to be a lot more opportunities?
Can I add to that?
Please.
I think what's going to happen, Joe, is where we are today in the audit process, right? You make this random sample of 60 items, and God knows if you're never going to find anything. In your analysis, you're probably going to get those 60 items, but those are the ones that you really want to take a look at. So I'm not sure it's going to add much more work, but it's going to add better work. And then what might happen in more situations is that you may get that 60 down to 10, and now you're only having to look at that 10 items.
So you're still going to sample. It's not,
well, what's going to happen is, as you said, you've got a bigger, you're looking at almost 100% of the data,
right?
And you're coming back with the anomalies. You're not going to have, hundreds and hundreds of anomalies. You're having a smaller set. And in more situations, I think those anomalies are going to be less than what our random samples are now. So you're getting a better test, and then eventually you may get to a smaller sample size. And then you could start doing other work too, with analytics and these items where you're getting away from the tested transactions. Does that make sense?
I think that's a great explanation for it. There are two concepts that are key to answering that question. The first is, and you hit it right on the head, we used to do statistical sampling, right? Why? Because we couldn't look at the entire thing, but now we can. We're still applying statistics to it, but we can look at everything. So, an example in cybersecurity. So when I was at Booz, that is their lifeblood, right? They are the folks who helped the NSA, and Edward Snowden, our guy. They were not very pleased with him. At any rate, the reality of cybersecurity is that things are happening so quickly and at a volume, and it's really about manually looking through everything and figuring out which are the behaviors that I need to drill into, right? It's hugely manually intensive, and you burn out your cybersecurity analysts because all they're doing is just looking through rows and rows of events, right? So we applied data science to try to automate as much as possible only the important events being delivered to the cybersecurity analysts, so that they were really just focusing their time and effort on the important stuff, right? Not spending all their time trying to find the important stuff. Okay. So Nathan and I were talking yesterday about sort of the future of work. Right? Are our jobs going away? I would argue there's a fairly significant time that where it's the human and the machine. There are a couple of books I would recommend you read. Well, first one is Human and Machine, and the second one is Mind and Machine. So those are the two books that are really doing a great job of encapsulating where we're going in the short term. In the long term, are our jobs going away? No, they're going to change. We may be doing different things. We may be learning different skills in the interim. 3 years ago, the CEO of AT&T stood up and said, I believe this is going to be so important to our future that I am allocating $8,000 per FTE for training, with two stipulations. They have to do it on their own time, and it has to have a direct correlation to the work that they did, the job that they are responsible for. Right? Now imagine how that rippled through AT&T. You had the folks who were like, technology? I'm never going to like that. I'm done. Right? I'm going to take an early retirement package. Okay? But that was the first time that I saw a CEO stand up and go, I'm investing, and this is how much I'm investing, right? They've got, 450,000 employees. It's not an insignificant check. The interesting thing to me is in the market, we're not, okay, let me go back in, 20 years ago when we sold enterprise software, we would do seminars, right? We would get a client to stand up and say, oh my God, my life is so much better now. Here's what the implementation felt like. Life is great. I got promoted and I'm super happy. Right? That doesn't work anymore because everybody's afraid that they're going to be exposed as the people who are behind. And for the folks who really do figure it out, they're like, I'm not talking about it. That's my intellectual property. That is my competitive advantage. So in order to foster these conversations, we're having to do things like CFO, CIO dinners, where it's in, a really nice place and a nice relaxed atmosphere, and just have them talking to each other about some of their experiences. And even then, it's hard to get the folks who have figured it out and the folks who haven't figured it out to open up.
Well, where I see it going for our industry is that individuals at that associate level are going to get to the next level a lot quicker. Because where we are now is we're spending a lot of time with those routine, mundane tasks because we have to, and it takes time for them to get to the next level where they can start looking at, goodwill and consolidations and that really heavy, thinking piece of it. When we eliminate that task, those individuals are going to get to the next level a lot quicker, and we're going to have better engagements, we're going to have better conversations with the client, and we're going to get additional services from the client.
Exactly. But that's really the thinking, right? You've got to think about the world is changing. What are our next revenue opportunities? But you're going to want to apply it internally first, right? You want to do it within your four walls so you can make mistakes, maybe identify some really material value for your organization. But, by learning it and doing it, you're just naturally, the wheels are going to start turning. You're going to think about your client base and the problems they're dealing with and go, oh my God. Like if, I've got a construction company, let's say, and they are, often using large pieces of equipment. What if you could optimize where everything is at the right time? I'll give you an example. There was a joint venture between Exxon and Chevron to build an oil field in Kazakhstan. And so the machinery compared to, even office building equipment, it dwarfs it, right? And so if you have a piece of equipment that's not in the right place at the right time, you're just writing checks for that thing sitting there, right? It's eroding your profitability, it's eroding your ability to execute. So we put RFIDs on all the equipment and figured out a network optimization that ensured that the equipment was in the right place. But then we thought, well, gee, natural next step is putting RFIDs on the employees. If we could get 1% better productivity, in other words, people should be where people should be, right? To them, that was $30 million a day, which for Exxon is, kind of a drop in the bucket. It's a rounding error. But, it adds up.
So perfect example, we have a significant client that transports very many cars throughout the country. And one of the struggles in speaking with the CFO is that when a call comes in, again, this goes back to predictive, a lot of times their equipment is not in the right place. And there are trends that go on, whether it's seasonal, whether there may be more convertibles in the winter or the summer. So this is the kind of data that...
Or the direction they're moving.
Correct. So a lot of times they'll spend a day and a half, 2 days to get a truck into a state where they need to pick up a bank. So it's all about predicting.
Mm-hmm. And it used to be that these capabilities were only in the realm of the, $75 billion company, right? Because of what it costs. But the cycle of R&D has brought that cost down to the point where I could, in my garage, build any kind of a data analytics application. Right? I could go take a Coursera course and build something. That level of sophistication was never even accessible to us before. And now, there are no excuses. Right? Now, the interesting thing, and this goes back to the changing nature of work, so we are now cranking out data scientists at a rate that has never been seen before, obviously because it didn't exist before, but we are trying to push as many people through as many data science programs as we can. What do they not have when they finish? Right. My data scientists used to hate me because I said this a lot. I said, a data scientist has a 50-50 shot of getting it wrong. Why? Well, let's see. They're intellectually curious, which is why they got into the space anyway. They want to solve problems, interesting problems, right? It is very challenging, and I tell you this because I've built deliveries, groups on this topic. It's very challenging to keep them focused, right? This is what we said in the SOW we were going to do and help them find. And data scientists, because of their natural curiosity, will begin to sift through the data and they'll be like, oh, shiny. Whoa. Right? The other thing is they tend to be pretty bright. I mean, now that we're pushing everybody through this curriculum, maybe that will change, but at least the groups that I've dealt with, they tend to be very, very smart individuals. What happens, what is another characteristic of super bright individuals? They're a little crazy, right? So imagine you have 100 children that are all just a little crazy. That's what managing like an AI group is today. You have to, it is manually intensive because you really have to connect with every single one and know that Tony is really good at these things, but what he's really passionate about is this other thing. And how do I start creating career opportunities for that individual that will keep them, right? Goes back to your hiring issue, right? Someone comes out of data science, particularly if they've got some real life experience, they're going to look around and say, make me offers. And then couple that with sort of the millennial mindset of, and by the way, my work needs to be meaningful to me. Right? It's not about feeding my family, it's about changing the world. Okay? I don't disagree with that, right? This is our opportunity. Like, I promise you, data science is going to change the world. And I don't mean that we're going to move into the sentient being situation where, the machines are going to take over. Right? Why? Because they're still being run by people. Okay? And humans, are not going to build the perfect machine yet. I think we still have some runway. I wouldn't worry about it too much. All right, so if you take away one thing, right? Artificial intelligence is really three things. It's robotic process automation, and I'm not referring to the Japanese pepper robot. I'm referring to process automation, right? They just put robotics in front of it because it's automation. Natural language processing. This is a textual search, sentiment analysis, and visual recognition. So let me give you that. So most of the applications that we talk about, and the ones that I'm getting really excited about, are the ones that combine those three ways of doing data science in a way that allows me to optimize certain business situations. Right? That's why it's not as simple as, hey, I just hired somebody and they know how to program in R. That is going to do you absolutely no good. Right? But if I had an application that kind of instinctively knew how much process automation, how much natural language processing I should use, which data models to apply, and I don't need to know that, that means everybody in this room could start asking questions that previously they had to be a data scientist to answer. That's what's really going to revolutionize business in the near term. Okay, now the market, because the marketing machine is in full force, we're starting to talk about this concept of enterprise AI. Right? Well, it's still aspirational because conceptually it's being able to look at the entire enterprise, all of its interdependencies, and derive knowledge from that data in ways we haven't previously been able to do. And so the entire enterprise becomes a yield optimization problem. Right? Just depends on which question you're asking. Are we there? Is anyone doing enterprise AI? I don't, you're going to read about it, but no one's doing it in its entirety yet. Unless they're very small, right? That's why I said the mid-market companies have a huge opportunity right now to figure this out before the competition, but it puts them on parity with the big boys. It's going to be interesting. So we talked about the fact that this is really augmenting what people can do, right? That's why I said we went from spreadsheets. I can look at 16,000 lines to BI. I can look at everything that happened to OLAP. I can build models and say, okay, I know that this impacts that, so let me build a model that flows that out, right? And that's my new forecast. I could do that for the entire enterprise. That's where we are now in terms of what's possible. But we're learning how to do it. I already mentioned, figure it out internally because there are huge benefits you guys can get from this that will, bring you incremental revenue. Maybe it's figuring out on all of Long Island based on the customers that you have that are your choice customers, right? Everybody else in your geography that you should be looking at. So, customer optimization. And like I said, as you're learning, you'll figure out new ways to apply this. And you're going, oh my God, for that client, we could kind of take what we just did and maybe sell it, right? Ideally as a service, recurring revenue. All right, so I guess, Nathan, this is for you guys, Nathan and Mike, but evaluate solutions that can be applied to multiple functions as opposed to locking yourself in. Otherwise, you will have a portfolio of AI products that don't talk to each other, just like the old BI days. And, well, it recaps essentially what I've already said twice. So that is our presentation for today. Any questions? Ooh, quiet. Wow. I bet if I brought in beer, you guys wouldn't be so quiet.
So the 800-pound gorilla in the room is with a client, and you start going over this process with them. And they say, so what should I do? Should I wait until other clients our size spend the money, R&D, $2 or $3 million that it's going to take to implement it, and we'll buy from Oracle for 10 cents on the dollar? Like, what should we do? Is it worth it for us to invest in it? Because these are the kind of questions that we get when we visit, and that's a hard question to answer if you don't have the answer before the meeting.
Right. So I would say, that's the build versus buy discussion, right? That's where you pull out that chart and say, this is the market right now. It's going to consolidate. The dust is far from having settled. So do you really want to invest in something that, might be the wrong thing, right? Rip and replace 2 years from now? You don't. So let's start small. So actually that means
Explain.
Or like this. All right. So I included a slide on a chalk talk that I do with a client that helps me understand where they are in their thinking and also allows me to seed what I believe is the right approach for somebody who's starting from zero. Okay. So I don't draw the whole thing out, but I'll walk you through the whole story. All right. It is 4 years ago. I am sitting with the controller of Intel. And she's saying to me, I'm a very analytic person. I know that we're not doing things as effectively as as we could. And, but we just can't reach consensus on where to begin. I said, okay. So I then sat down with the CFO, since, I had a little background information. And the CFO told me this. He said, we build the chipsets for artificial intelligence. We present at Strata, right, which is one of the data science conferences, one of the original data science conferences, because there's tons of them now. The market just expects that we know everything there is to know about the application of artificial intelligence. Right? We're building neural network components. He said, so if you talk to my CIO, he's going to say, oh yeah, no, we're doing this, and we're doing prescriptive intelligence, and we've got a stable of data scientists. By the way, it was Intel that was the, call me in 3 months, call me in 6 months. 1 year later, health. So the CFO goes, but the reality is that this is where we manage our business. Right? Data science is, what is it competing against? Spreadsheets? Basic BI? Maybe some OLAP. Maybe. Maybe. Right? They were, and please, we should be under NDA, right? Because, this is not to lead this recording.
Nobody's listening.
Exactly. Yeah, no one's ever going to listen to it again. And what he said was, how do I move the entire organization over to this side? So well, let me give you an example of a very cost-effective way to find the value in what you could do to apply data science. Said, let's figure out what the first question is that you should answer. And let's do that by bringing your 5 directs into the room. And the 5 directs were finance, sales, marketing, R&D, and the investment arm, which, by the way, is bigger than Goldman Sachs. Right? When they came in, I said, the average tenure at Intel is 23 years. So, highly experienced business population. I said, each of you, for our next meeting, I would like you to come in with something where for years you've been like, look, if I could answer this question, it would be hugely material for me. But I can't. But my gut tells me there's something new. I know this market. I know this industry. I know our company. I know there's something new. Right? Those are the questions I want you to bring. 2 per person. Fast forward, we get to the next meeting. Got a list of 10 questions. I said, the first 6, you could answer today using the tools you've got already. All right? It's not going to be data science intensive. You just haven't figured out how to do it. Happy to help you with it, but I prefer to focus on the other 4. I'll give you an example of what one of them was, because it's the one we didn't do. So I'm not helping. The R&D guy said, is there a way for me to monitor minerals consumption globally so that I can identify signals that will tell me that our competition is going in a new direction. It's developing something that we don't know about. And the second question was, can I also then monitor it to ensure that we are not inadvertently sending out signals? Right? So, interestingly enough, engineers are a chatty bunch. And one of the things that we were hypothesizing on doing was scraping LinkedIn. See what conversations were happening around new developments, R&D. Coupling that with minerals consumption data, their own consumption data, and then demand models, and putting that, that was the next step, right? The next step becomes, how do I turn that first urgent question into a mathematical query? So, because there wasn't anything, I developed a methodology for the deployment of AI at the time called RAPID, because it's got to have an acronym. So the first one is rationalize down to the first question you're going to ask. And then aggregate all the pieces, all the data that you might need, internally, externally, to answer the question, and then prototype it. That's what you're doing here. You're doing a proof of concept. And what do you have at the end of the proof of concept? If you've done it correctly, you've had the business involved, you've had IT involved, you've had the data scientists involved, and you wind up with a data puddle. Right? That, by the way, is my term. I coined that 10 years ago. Which sort of addresses what the Thomson Reuters problem was, right? We built a data lake, nobody came. Why? Because the business users don't trust it. They can't tick and tie it and be sure that everything in it is right. They just keep going back to their trusted sources of data. And they weren't involved in the journey, so you didn't educate them along the way. You didn't teach them how to use it. Let them, it's kind of like, show me, right? As an analyst, I have to see and touch and use. And then I start developing trust. Okay, so here we've got a data puddle. We also have a small community of business users around that data puddle who now trust it and helped build it and understand how to use it. They become natural evangelists, right? Because they're sitting in the cafeteria going, oh my God, this is so cool, we found, blah. Right? It's amazing, it's going to change everything for us. Now you do the same thing for question 2. You take that puddle, you enrich it with some more data, any additional data that you need to answer question number 2. And you keep doing that. And every step of the way, you're building a community of business people who are comfortable with what we're doing, what we're finding. They're beginning to trust the data. They're talking about it to everyone else in the company. And by the time you get further down the line, and by the way, these questions, if there's no ROI in it, you're not asking it. It needs to have a direct connection to strategy, which is why the C-suite needs to be part of driving this. It's got to be a mandate. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of people. Think of it like this. Everybody's heard the old analogy: 6 blind men and the elephant, right? No, it kind of looks like this, or it's like this, or there's the tail. It looks like this. What if, or actually, what AI will allow us to do is get those blind men together and give them sight. Now, all of a sudden, they can see the entire elephant from every possible angle. And now the conversations that they're having are different. Right? It's creating collaboration because you're eliminating some of what we have evolved into, which is very siloed in terms of operating models. Okay, so quickly, just to finish this up, this space, this to me is the competency gap. This is where you're bringing the people along, you're educating them. You've got maybe 5 people who understand it here, 10 people who understand it here. Eventually, every department has somebody who understands the data lake and how to use it. Now, the value of walking through this is starting without this part, but figuring out where is that client. And in a buy versus build conversation now, I would say the priority is how do I get value out of this technology fastest? Oracle, I can promise you, is going to be a longer road than some of the smaller applications that are available now, right? Minimize your investment, although I do appreciate the 10 cents on the dollar with the Oracle thing. But, you know, the license cost and the maintenance cost, it's just a fraction of what you're going to spend putting it in. Right? Right now, my recommendation is find something that has some breadth to it in terms of applicability, and what is the first question you've got to ask that would be valuable to your organization, that would change your organization. And I think that's it. So any questions on this? Any questions on anything that we've talked about in the last hour and a half? First of all, we're 5 minutes over, so I really appreciate everyone hanging in there. And I hope this was at least helpful for giving you a sense of what's actually happening out there, because we're all being bombarded by market, and only some of it's real. And with that, thank you very much. That was a lot of content.
Steve, that was great. This is perfect. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate your
no,
time.
it was great.
This is the other thing we gotta take, beat it into everyone's side.
It's coming.
No, I know.
You know that adoption curve that was like that? We're all looking at a wave that's coming at us.
And it's funny too, I was thinking of where we are on this, because, you know, we're all excited about it, but my concerns that we're gonna keep coming down.